My granddaughter left me alone on my 70th birthday, using all my money to travel with her boyfriend. I pretended it didn't hurt, but when they came back, they found the entire house empty, with a letter from my lawyer that simply said, "Outstanding. Debt." I never thought I'd be telling this story, but here I am. My name is Rose, and 3 years ago, I lost my daughter Emma in a car accident. She was only 42, driving home from work on a rainy Thursday evening when a drunk driver ran a red light. In that single moment, my world collapsed. Emma was everything to me, my only child, my best friend, my reason for getting up every morning. After the funeral, when all the flowers had wilted and the casseroles from neighbors had been eaten or thrown away, I was left with Jessica, my granddaughter, Emma's only child. At 24, Jessica had Emma's same green eyes and stubborn chin, but none of her mother's warmth. Still, she was all I had left of my daughter, and I clung to that connection, like a drowning woman clinging to driftwood. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. The first year after Emma's death was the darkest period of my life. I barely left the house, barely ate, barely spoke to anyone. Jessica would visit occasionally, usually when she needed money for rent or groceries. I always gave it to her, grateful for any excuse to see her face, to hear her call me Grandma, Rose, the way Emma used to encourage her to do when she was little. "I'm struggling, Grandma," she'd say, sitting across from me at my kitchen table, her eyes filling with tears that seemed genuine. "I know Mom would want you to help me get back on my feet." And how could I say no? Emma would have wanted me to take care of her daughter. So I wrote check after check, each one a small tribute to my daughter's memory. As my 70th birthday approached, I felt a spark of hope I hadn't experienced since Emma died. Maybe this milestone could be a new beginning for Jessica and me. Maybe we could start building the relationship that grief had made so difficult. I spent weeks planning every detail, calling the bakery where Emma used to order my birthday cakes, buying Jessica's favorite wine, even hiring a cleaning service to make sure the house sparkled. "I want you to come for dinner on my birthday," I told Jessica during one of her brief visits. "Just the two of us. We'll cook together like your mom and I used to do." Jessica looked up from her phone, barely meeting my eyes. "Sure, Grandma." Sounds nice, but there was something flat in her voice, something distracted. I pushed the feeling aside, telling myself she was still processing her grief differently than I was. The morning of my birthday arrived gray and overcast, matching my nervous energy. I'd been up since dawn, preparing Emma's famous lasagna recipe, setting the dining room table with my good china, and arranging fresh flowers from my garden. Every detail had to be perfect. This wasn't just a birthday dinner, it was my chance to reconnect with the only family I had left. Jessica arrived 3 hours late. I heard her car door slam in the driveway and practically ran to the window, my heart lifting despite the delay. She was here. That's what mattered. But when I opened the front door, the smile died on my lips. Jessica stood on my porch with a young man I'd never seen before, tall, thin, with expensive sneakers and a smirk that made my skin crawl. This wasn't the intimate family dinner I'd imagined. "Happy birthday, Grandma," Jessica said, brushing past me into the house. "This is Tyler, my boyfriend. You don't mind if he joins us, right?" Mind? I had bought ingredients for 2, set the table for 2, planned an evening for 2. But looking at Jessica's expectant face, I swallowed my disappointment. "Of course not, sweetheart. The more the merrier." Tyler walked through my living room like he was appraising it, his eyes lingering on Emma's antique piano, the family photos covering every surface, my late husband's war medals displayed in their case. He didn't say hello, didn't wish me happy birthday, didn't even acknowledge my presence beyond a brief nod. "Nice place," he said to Jessica, as if I wasn't standing right there. "Very traditional." Dinner was awkward from the start. Tyler spent most of the meal on his phone while Jessica picked at her food, both of them carrying on conversations that excluded me entirely. They talked about people I didn't know, places I'd never been, plans that clearly didn't include me. I felt like a stranger in my own dining room, watching my granddaughter slip further away from me with each passing minute. "So, Grandma," Jessica said suddenly, setting down her fork, "Tyler and I have some exciting news." My heart jumped. Were they engaged? Despite Tyler's obvious rudeness, maybe this was what Jessica needed, someone to share her life with, someone to help her heal from losing her mother. "We're going to Europe," Jessica continued, her eyes lighting up for the first time all evening. A whole month backpacking through Italy, France, and Spain. Tyler's always wanted to see the world, and I figured, why not? We're young, right? That sounds wonderful, I said carefully, though something cold was settling in my stomach. Are you planning to go? Tyler looked up from his phone for the first time. Next week, actually. We found this amazing last-minute deal. Next week. My heart sank. That's very soon. Have you saved up enough for such a big trip? Jessica and Tyler exchanged a look that I couldn't quite read. Jessica reached across the table and took my hand, her fingers cold against my skin. That's actually what we wanted to talk to you about, Grandma. We're a little short on funds, and I was hoping. She squeezed my hand. I was hoping you might be able to help us out, just this once. It would mean everything to me. I stared at her, this girl who looked so much like my daughter but felt like a stranger. How much would you need? $25,000, Tyler said bluntly, not even looking up from his phone. The number hit me like a physical blow. $25,000. That was most of my retirement savings, money I'd been carefully budgeting to last me through. My remaining years? Tyler! Jessica hissed, shooting him a warning look. Then she turned back to me, her voice soft and pleading. I know it's a lot, Grandma, but this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Mom always talked about traveling when she was younger, before she had me. She never got the chance. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. I feel like I need to do this for her. To live the life she never got to live. Using Emma's memory like that, it was calculated, manipulative, and it worked. Because what if Jessica was right? What if Emma would have wanted her daughter to see the world, to have adventures, to live fully? What if saying no meant I was betraying my daughter's wishes? My hands shook as I reached for my checkbook. I wrote that check with trembling hands, watching $25,000 disappear from my account, money I had saved penny by penny over decades. Jessica hugged me tight, whispering, "Thank you," over and over, but even her embrace felt hollow. Tyler barely acknowledged the gift, just folded the check and slipped it into his wallet like it was nothing more than a tip. We'll send you postcards. From every city, Jessica promised, her eyes bright with excitement. And I'll call you all the time. This is going to be amazing, Grandma. Thank you for making this possible. But as I watched them prepare to leave, gathering their jackets and Jessica's purse, a terrible realization washed over me. They were leaving. Tonight. On my birthday. The dinner I had planned so carefully, the evening I had hoped would bring us closer together, was over before it had really begun. Wait, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You're leaving now? Jessica paused at the door, one hand on the handle. We have to pack, Grandma. Our flight is early tomorrow morning. But it's my birthday, I said, hating how small and desperate I sounded. I thought we could spend the evening together. Maybe watch one of your mom's old home movies or look through photo albums. Tyler let out an impatient sigh, and Jessica shot him another look. Maybe when we get back, she said, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. We'll have so much to tell you about the trip. And then they were gone, leaving me standing in my doorway watching their taillights disappear into the darkness. The house felt enormous and empty around me, filled with the lingering smell of the dinner that had barely been touched. I stood there for a long time, listening to the silence, before finally closing the door and turning back to face the wreckage of my birthday celebration. The next few weeks passed in a blur of loneliness, punctuated by occasional text messages from Jessica. Brief, impersonal updates. Made it to Rome safely. The food here is incredible. Tyler loves the museums. Each message felt like a postcard from a stranger, formal and distant. She never asked how I was doing, never mentioned missing me, never acknowledged that she had left me alone on one of the most important days of my life. I tried to fill my days with routine activities, grocery shopping, tending to my garden, watching my afternoon television shows, but everything felt different now. The house that had once been filled with Emma's laughter and Jessica's childhood memories now felt like a mausoleum. I found myself talking to Emma's photo on the mantelpiece, asking her what I should do, how I could reach her daughter before I lost her completely. 3 weeks into their trip, my phone rang at 7 in the morning. I fumbled for it, my heart racing with worry. International calls at odd hours never brought good news. Grandma? Jessica's voice crackled through the static. I'm so sorry to call you so early, but I need your help. I sat up in bed, instantly alert. What's wrong? What's wrong? Sweetheart, are you hurt? No, nothing like that. It's just... Her voice broke, and I could hear her crying on the other end of the line. "We're in Barcelona, and Tyler got sick. Really sick. We think it might be food poisoning, but the hospital. Bills here are expensive, and our travel insurance doesn't cover everything." My grandmother instincts kicked in immediately. "How much do you need?" "5,000, she said quickly. "I know it's a lot, and I hate asking, but I don't know what else to do. The doctors say he needs to stay for observation, and the hotel is charging us extra fees, and we're running out of money." $5,000, on top of the $25,000 I had already given them. That would drain my savings account completely, leaving me with just my monthly Social Security checks to live on. But the alternative, imagining Jessica stranded in a foreign country with a sick boyfriend unable to get proper medical care, was unthinkable. "I'll transfer the money this morning," I heard myself saying. "To your account." "Actually," Jessica said, her voice steadying now that she had gotten what she wanted, "could you wire it to Tyler's account? It'll be faster that way, and he's the one dealing with the hospital directly." Something about that request felt wrong, but I pushed the feeling aside. Jessica was in crisis mode, probably not thinking clearly. Of course, she would want the money to go wherever it would be most useful. "Send me his account information," I said. "I'll take care of it right away." "You're the best, Grandma. I love you so much. Tyler's going to be fine because of you." After I hung up, I sat on the edge of my bed staring at my phone. Something nagged at me about the conversation, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was. Jessica had sounded upset, genuinely worried about Tyler's health. But there had been something else in her voice, too. A note of calculation that reminded me uncomfortably of the way she had asked for the original $25,000. I pushed the thought away and got dressed. I had a wire transfer to arrange, and banks opened early. Whatever doubts I was having, they were probably just my own paranoia. Jessica needed help, and I was the only family she had. Emma would have expected me to take care of her daughter, no matter what the cost. At the bank, the teller looked concerned when I requested the wire transfer. "This is a substantial amount, Mrs. Patterson. Are you sure about this transaction?" "It's for my granddaughter," I explained. "A medical emergency." She nodded and processed the paperwork, but I caught her exchanging a glance with her supervisor. I left the bank feeling uneasy, though I couldn't explain why. Maybe it was the sympathetic look in the teller's eyes or the way she had asked twice if I was certain about the amount. Maybe it was the growing realization that I had just sent $30,000 to a young man I had met once, who hadn't even bothered to thank me for the original gift. That evening, I called Jessica to confirm that the money had arrived safely. The call went straight to voicemail. I tried again the next day, and the day after that, each time, voicemail. I sent text messages asking about Tyler's condition, about when they planned to return home, about whether they needed anything else. No responses. Finally, after a week of silence, I received a single text message. "Tyler's better. Extending trip another 2 weeks. Having amazing time. Love you." Extending the trip. With my money. While I sat alone in my empty house, wondering when my granddaughter had stopped caring about me and started seeing me as nothing more than a source of funding for her adventures. I walked to my mailbox that afternoon and found it stuffed with bills, utilities, insurance, property, taxes. Bills I wasn't sure I could pay now that my savings account showed a balance of less than $300. The reality of my situation hit me like a physical blow. At 70 years old, I was essentially broke, having given my financial security to a granddaughter who couldn't even be bothered to return my phone calls. That night, I did something I hadn't done since Emma's funeral. I cried until I had no tears left. I spent the next few days in a strange fog, going through the motions of daily life while my mind struggled to process what had happened. Jessica and Tyler had been gone for over a month now, and I had heard nothing beyond that single, dismissive text message. I found myself checking my phone obsessively, hoping for a call, a photo, anything that might indicate my granddaughter remembered I existed. It was while cleaning Jessica's old bedroom, something I did when I missed her most, that I found the laptop. She had left it behind in her rush to pack for Europe, shoved under her bed alongside some old textbooks and clothes. I almost put it back where I found it, respecting her privacy, but something made me pause. Maybe if I could access her email or social media, I could see how she was doing, get some reassurance that she was safe and happy. I carried the laptop downstairs to my kitchen table and opened it. To my surprise, it wasn't password protected, Jessica had always been careless about things like that, even as a child. Her email was still open in the browser, and I told myself I would just quickly check for any recent messages about her trip. What I found instead changed everything. The first email I saw was dated 2 days before their Europe trip, sent from Jessica to someone named Marcus with the subject line, "Easy money." My hands started shaking as I read. The old lady totally bought the travel story. 25 grand, just like that. Tyler was right. She's so desperate for family connection that she'll pay for anything if I frame it right. The fake crying about doing it for mom was genius. She practically threw the checkbook at me. Europe, here we come. I stared at the screen, reading the words over and over, trying to make sense of them. Easy money, the old lady, fake crying. Each phrase felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I scrolled down to see Marcus's response. Brilliant. Told you the grieving grandma angle would work? How much more do you think she's good for? Tyler's got that gambling debt to pay off, right? Gambling debt, not food poisoning in Barcelona, not medical bills or travel emergencies. Tyler owed money to dangerous people, and they had used my grief and loneliness to fund his problems. With trembling fingers, I kept scrolling through Jessica's emails. There were dozens of them, dating back months, all discussing me like I was some kind of business opportunity, messages planning how to manipulate my emotions, calculating how much money they could extract, even mocking my loneliness and need for family connection. One email from Tyler made my stomach turn. Your grandma is pathetic. The way she looks at you like you're her whole world, it's honestly creepy. But hey, if she wants to pay for our lifestyle, I'm not complaining. Think she's good for another 10 grand before we have to cut her off? Jessica's response was even worse. Probably more than that. She's got this huge guilt complex about not being able to save my mom. I can work that angle for months. The woman is sitting on a decent retirement fund, and she's got no one else to spend it on. Might as well be us, right? I closed the laptop and ran to the bathroom, where I was violently sick. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that my body couldn't process it. This wasn't a granddaughter who had made poor choices or gotten involved with the wrong crowd. This was a predator who had identified my vulnerabilities and exploited them systematically. I thought about every conversation we'd had since Emma's death, every time Jessica had asked for money, every moment I'd felt grateful just to see her face. Had any of it been real? Had she ever felt even a flicker of genuine affection for me? Or had I always been nothing more than a mark to be conned? The phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. For a wild moment, I hoped it might be Jessica, calling to explain, to apologize, to tell me this was all some terrible misunderstanding. Instead, it was my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, calling to check on me. Rose, dear, I haven't seen you outside in a few days. Are you feeling all right? I wanted to tell her everything. About the money, about the emails, about the devastating realization that the granddaughter I'd sacrificed everything for saw me as nothing more than a source of income. But the words wouldn't come. How do you explain to someone that you've been systematically robbed by the only family you have left? I'm fine, Helen. I managed. Just tired. Well, if you need anything at all, you know where to find me. Sometimes we all need someone to talk to. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at Jessica's laptop. Mrs. Chen's kindness had reminded me of something important. There were people in my life who cared about me genuinely, without expecting anything in return. Jessica wasn't the only human connection I had. I had just been so blinded by grief and guilt that I'd forgotten. I opened the laptop again and forced myself to read more of the emails. I needed to understand the full scope of what had been done to me. The deeper I dug, the sicker I felt. Jessica had been planning this manipulation for over a year, carefully studying my emotional triggers and weaknesses. She had even researched inheritance laws, trying to figure out how much money I might leave her when I died. But the worst discovery came when I found emails discussing their actual activities in Europe. There had been no medical emergency in Barcelona. Instead, Jessica and Tyler had been living it up in expensive hotels, eating at the finest restaurants, and, most devastatingly, Tyler had been gambling away thousands of dollars in Monte Carlo casinos. My retirement savings, money I had worked 40 years to accumulate, had been lost at poker tables and roulette wheels. One email from Tyler, sent just 3 days ago, showed a photo of him holding a champagne bottle in what looked like a luxury yacht. The caption read, "Thanks, Grandma Rose, living the high life on your dime." That was when something inside me finally broke. Not my heart, that had already been shattered. Something deeper. My willingness to be a victim, my need to preserve a relationship at any cost, my desperate clinging to a granddaughter who saw me as nothing more than a convenient ATM. I looked around my kitchen, at the photos of Emma covering every surface, at the birthday cake I'd bought myself sitting untouched in the refrigerator, at the stack of unpaid bills growing taller each day. I thought about the teller at the bank who had tried to warn me, about Mrs. Chen's genuine concern, about all the signs I had ignored because I was so desperate to matter to someone. I wasn't going to be anyone's victim anymore. I picked up my phone and called my lawyer's office. When his secretary answered, I said 5 words that would change everything. I need to protect myself. David Morrison had been my lawyer for over 20 years, handling everything from my husband's will to property disputes with difficult neighbors. He was a kind man in his 60s who had always treated me with respect and patience. When I walked into his office carrying Jessica's laptop and a folder full of printed emails, he took one look at my face and immediately cleared his schedule. "Rose, you look like you've seen a ghost. What's happened?" I set the laptop on his desk and opened it to Jessica's email account. "I need you to read these, all of them, and then I need you to tell me what my options are." David spent the next hour reading through the emails while I sat in silence, watching his expression grow darker with each message. Occasionally, he would pause to ask me questions. When had Jessica first asked for money? How much had I given her over the years? Whether I had any documentation of the transactions? I answered as honestly as I could, though admitting the full scope of my financial losses was humiliating. "Rose," he said finally, leaning back in his chair, "this is elder financial abuse. What Jessica has done to you is a crime." "But she's my granddaughter," I said weakly, even though I knew how pathetic that sounded. "That makes it worse, not better. The law takes these cases very seriously, especially when the victim is a senior citizen and the perpetrator is a family member who exploited emotional manipulation." He gestured to the printed emails. "This documentation is damning. Jessica has essentially confessed to fraud in writing." David explained my options methodically. I could file a police report and pursue criminal charges. I could sue Jessica civilly to recover the money she had stolen. I could report the case to Adult Protective Services, but what interested me most was something else he mentioned almost in passing. "There's also the matter of protecting your remaining assets," he said. "If Jessica has been this brazen about taking your money, she'll certainly try again when she returns. We need to make sure she can't access anything else." That afternoon, I opened new bank accounts that Jessica had no knowledge of and transferred my remaining funds there. David helped me change all my passwords and security questions, removing any information that Jessica might have access to. We also drafted new legal documents, a revised will, updated power of attorney paperwork, and most importantly, a formal demand letter for the return of the $30,000 Jessica had taken. "The beauty of this approach," David explained, "is that it's entirely legal and documented. Jessica took money under false pretenses. That's fraud. The emails prove intent to deceive. If she doesn't return the money, we have grounds for both criminal and civil action. But I wanted more than just legal protection. I wanted Jessica to understand that her actions had consequences, that she couldn't treat people the way she had treated me and expect no repercussions." As David and I worked through the afternoon, a plan began to form in my mind. "David," I said slowly, "what would happen if someone tried to access my house and found it empty?" He raised an eyebrow. "Empty how?" I told him my idea, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw him smile. Over the next 2 weeks, while Jessica and Tyler continued their extended European vacation on my money, I put my plan into action. I hired a moving company to pack up everything I owned: furniture, personal belongings, family photos, even Emma's piano. Some items went into a secure storage unit, others went to my new apartment across town. The most valuable pieces, including Emma's jewelry and my late husband's collectibles, went into a safety deposit box at my new bank. The apartment I chose was perfect for my needs. Smaller than my house, but comfortable, with good security and a community of other seniors who actually seemed to enjoy each other's company. For the First time in months, I felt like I was making a positive choice for my future, rather than just reacting to Jessica's manipulation. Mrs. Chen was the only neighbor I told about my move. She helped me pack Emma's photo albums and listened without judgment as I explained what Jessica had done. "You're doing the right thing, Rose," she said firmly. "No one should treat their family that way, and no one should have to tolerate it." I keep wondering if I'm being too harsh, I admitted. She's all I have left of Emma. Mrs. Chen stopped packing and looked at me seriously. "Rose, honey, Jessica isn't Emma. Emma would be horrified by what her daughter has done to you. Don't dishonor your daughter's memory by letting Jessica continue to abuse you in her name." Those words hit me harder than any of Jessica's emails had. Mrs. Chen was right. By enabling Jessica's behavior, by making excuses for her cruelty, I wasn't honoring Emma's memory. I was betraying it. Emma had been kind, generous, and honest. She would never have wanted her daughter to become the kind of person who preyed on vulnerable family members. The day I officially moved out of my house, I felt lighter than I had in years. David met me at the empty property to oversee the final details. We changed all the locks, installed a security system, and posted legal notices about the change in occupancy. Anyone attempting to enter the house would find it completely empty except for a single envelope on the kitchen counter. "Are you sure about this approach?" David asked as we stood in the echoing emptiness of what had been my home for 30 years. I thought about Jessica's emails, about Tyler's mocking messages, about the champagne photo from the yacht. I thought about my 70th birthday dinner, sitting alone at my dining room table while my granddaughter counted the money she had stolen from me. "I'm sure," I said. That evening, I called Jessica from my new apartment. After weeks of being ignored, I was curious to see if she would actually answer. She picked up on the fourth ring, her voice bright and carefree. "Grandma, I was just thinking about you. How are things at home?" "Oh, I said carefully. "Things have been changing quite a bit lately. When are you planning to come back?" "Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. Tyler and I are having such an amazing time here, and we've met these incredible people who invited us to join them on a trip to Greece. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but we're a little short on funds again." Here it was. Another request for money, made with the same casual entitlement that had characterized all our recent interactions. I marveled at her audacity. She hadn't spoken to me in weeks, had ignored my calls and messages, and now she was asking for more money as if nothing had happened. "How much would you need this time?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Just 10,000. I know it sounds like a lot, but Greece is expensive, and this group we're with has connections to some really exclusive experiences. It would be like getting a private tour of ancient history. Mom always loved learning about different cultures. I feel like she'd want me to take advantage of this." Again with Emma's memory, again with the emotional manipulation designed to make me feel guilty for even questioning her requests. But this time, instead of falling for it, I felt only cold anger. "That sounds wonderful, Jessica," I said. "I'll need a few days to arrange the transfer. Why don't you call me when you get back to the States and we'll work out all the details then?" "You're the best, Grandma. I love you so much." After I hung up, I sat in my new living room surrounded by boxes I was still unpacking, and I smiled. Jessica had no idea what was waiting for her. Jessica and Tyler returned from Europe on a Thursday afternoon in late September. I knew because I had been monitoring her social media from my new apartment, watching their posts about coming home to reality and missing the European lifestyle already. What they didn't know was that David had arranged for a discreet security company to alert us the moment anyone approached my old house. The call came at 2:47 p.m. "Mrs. Patterson, there's a vehicle in your driveway. 2 young people attempting to access the front door." I thanked the security company and immediately called David. "They're here. Remember, Rose, don't answer your phone when they call. Let them discover the situation on their own. We want their reaction to be completely genuine." For the next hour, I sat in my new living room staring at my silent phone. I imagined Jessica and Tyler walking through the empty rooms of my house, their confusion turning to panic as they realized everything was gone. I thought about them finding the envelope on the kitchen counter, opening it with trembling hands, reading the contents with growing horror. The envelope contained 2 items: a copy of David's demand letter requesting immediate repayment of $30,000 and a brief note from me that simply said, "I found your emails, Jessica. All of them." My phone started ringing at 4:15 p.m. Jessica's name flashed on the screen, and I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately, and again. By 6 o'clock, I had 17 missed calls and 12 voicemails. I finally decided to listen to them, curious to hear how Jessica would try to explain her way out of this situation. The first few voicemails were confusion and panic. "Grandma, where are you? Why is the house empty? Please call me back. I'm really worried." But as the messages progressed, I could hear Jessica's tone changing from concern to frustration to barely controlled rage. Voicemail number 8 was particularly revealing. "Grandma, I don't know what you think you found, but you're completely overreacting. Those emails were just jokes between friends. Tyler and I never meant any of that stuff seriously. You can't just disappear and leave us with nowhere to go. This is crazy. Jokes. Between friends." I almost laughed at the audacity of it. $30,000 stolen through elaborate emotional manipulation was apparently just a joke. By voicemail number 12, Jessica had abandoned all pretense of affection. "You know what, Grandma? This is exactly why Mom always said you were impossible to deal with. You're paranoid and vindictive, and you don't understand how the real world works. Tyler and I needed that money for legitimate expenses. If you can't handle helping your own family without keeping score like some kind of accountant, then maybe we're better off without you." That message told me everything I needed to know. Even caught red-handed with evidence of her fraud, Jessica's instinct was to attack me rather than take responsibility for her actions. She was using Emma's name again, trying to make me feel guilty for protecting myself from further abuse. I turned off my phone and went to bed early, sleeping better than I had in months. The next morning, I found Jessica waiting in the lobby of my new apartment building. The security guard had refused to let her up without my permission, so she was sitting on a bench near the mailboxes, looking haggard and desperate. Her designer clothes from the European trip were wrinkled, her hair unwashed, and there were dark circles under her eyes. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. "Grandma," she said, jumping up when she saw me. "Thank God. I've been here since 6 a.m. waiting for you. How did you find me, Jessica?" "It wasn't easy. I had to call every apartment complex in town." She tried to smile, but it looked forced and unnatural. "Can we talk, please? I think there's been a huge misunderstanding." I studied her face, looking for any sign of genuine remorse or shame. What I saw instead was calculation. She was already working on her next manipulation strategy, trying to figure out how to regain control of the situation. "There's no misunderstanding," I said quietly. "I read every email, Jessica. Every single one." Her face went pale, but she recovered quickly. "Those emails were taken out of context. Tyler was going through a really dark time, and he said things he didn't mean. We were both stressed about money and travel plans, and sometimes people say stupid things when they're under pressure. Stupid things like calling me pathetic, like planning how to manipulate my grief over losing Emma, like laughing about taking advantage of my loneliness." Jessica's eyes filled with tears, but unlike before, they didn't affect me. I had seen behind the curtain now. I knew these tears were just another performance. "I never meant for you to see those emails," she said. "I love you, Grandma. You're all the family I have left." "No, Jessica. You had family. You chose to see me as a source of income instead." She grabbed my arm, her grip tight and desperate. "Where are you living now? Why won't you just talk to me like a normal person? This is insane." I gently removed her hand from my arm. "I'm living somewhere safe. Somewhere people can't take advantage of me anymore." "Take advantage? Grandma, I'm your granddaughter. Family helps family. That's what Mom would have wanted." There it was again, Emma's name used as a weapon against me. But this time, instead of guilt, I felt only anger. "Your mother would be ashamed of what you've become," I said, and watched Jessica flinch as if I had slapped her. Emma was kind and honest and generous. She gave to people because she loved them, not because she expected something in return. "You're nothing like her." "How dare you?" Jessica hissed, her mask finally slipping completely. "How dare you compare me to her? She's dead, Grandma. Dead. And you're so pathetic and lonely that you'd rather live in some fantasy about perfect Emma than deal with the real living family you actually have." The venom in her voice was shocking, but also clarifying. This was who Jessica really was. Angry, entitled, willing to use even her mother's death as ammunition in an argument. Any doubt I had about my decision to cut her off evaporated completely. "The real family I actually have," I repeated slowly, "consists of people who care about me without expecting payment. People who check on me because they're worried, not Because they need money. People who remember my birthday and don't leave me alone to count the cost of their affection. Jessica stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her trying to decide whether to continue the manipulation or abandon it entirely. Finally, she chose abandon it. Fine, she said, her voice cold and bitter. Keep your money, keep your empty apartment and your paranoid delusions. But don't expect me to come running back when you realize how lonely you really are. She turned and walked toward the exit, then paused and looked back at me. Tyler's in real trouble, you know. He owes money to dangerous people. If something happens to him, that's on you. And there it was, the final manipulation attempt. Even now, even after being caught in such elaborate deception, Jessica was trying to make me feel responsible for Tyler's gambling debts. Tyler's problems are Tyler's problems, I said. And your problems are your problems. Neither of them are mine anymore. Jessica left without another word, and I watched through the lobby windows as she got into a taxi and disappeared from my life. I felt lighter immediately, as if a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying had been lifted from my shoulders, but I knew this wasn't over. Desperate people do desperate things, and Jessica was clearly desperate. 3 days after our confrontation in the apartment lobby, Jessica made one last desperate attempt to regain control. She showed up at my old house with a locksmith, apparently believing she could simply break in and reclaim what she considered her inheritance. What she found instead was a police officer waiting for her, alerted by the security system David had installed. I learned about this from David, who called me that evening with barely contained amusement in his voice. Jessica tried to tell the officer that she lived there and had lost her keys. When he asked for identification showing that address, she became belligerent and accused you of stealing her rightful property. What happened then? The officer issued her a trespassing warning and informed her that any further attempts to access the property would result in arrest. He also gave her a copy of the cease and desist order we filed yesterday. I had authorized David to file the cease and desist after Jessica's threatening comments about Tyler's dangerous creditors. If she wanted to continue harassing me, she would have to explain her behavior to a judge. How did she react to that? About as well as you'd expect. A lot of shouting about ungrateful relatives and family loyalty. The officer was not impressed. After hanging up with David, I sat in my new living room feeling something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete peace. For the first time since Emma's death, I wasn't walking on eggshells around Jessica, wasn't calculating how much money I could afford to give her, wasn't desperately trying to maintain a relationship that existed only in my imagination. The apartment community I had moved into was called Sunset Gardens, and it was nothing like the isolated house where I had spent 3 years mourning alone. My neighbors were mostly other seniors, people who had lived full lives and were now enjoying a more relaxed pace. Within a week of moving in, I had been invited to join the book club, the gardening committee, and the weekly poker game. You're different than when you first moved in, observed Margaret, a retired teacher who lived across the hall from me. We were sitting in the community garden, tending to the tomato plants we had planted together. You seem lighter somehow, I thought, about how to explain it. I've been carrying a burden for a long time. Recently, I was able to put it down. Margaret nodded knowingly. Family troubles? Something like that. I had a son who was addicted to gambling, she said quietly, her hands never stopping their work with the plants. For years, I enabled him, paid his debts, bailed him out of trouble, made excuses for his behavior. I thought I was helping him, but I was really just making it easier for him to avoid consequences. What changed? I realized I was killing him, with kindness. As long as I was there to fix his problems, he had no reason to fix them himself. The hardest thing I ever did was tell him no and mean it. Do you regret it? Margaret was quiet for a long moment. He's been clean for 5 years now. Has a job, a small apartment, a girlfriend who doesn't know about his past. He sends me a card every Christmas with a picture of them together. We don't talk much, but when we do, he treats me with respect. She looked at me directly. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the opportunity to face their own consequences. That conversation stayed with me for days. I had spent so much time feeling guilty about cutting Jessica off that I hadn't considered the possibility that it might actually help her in the long run. As long as I was available to fund her lifestyle and absorb her emotional abuse, she had no incentive to change. Maybe forcing her to confront the reality of her choices would eventually lead to growth. 2 months after Jessica's failed break-in attempt, I received an unexpected visitor. Tyler appeared at my apartment building's front desk, looking nothing like the cocky young man who had accompanied Jessica to my birthday dinner. He was thinner, shabbier, with the desperate look of someone who had run out of options. "Mrs. Patterson," he said when the security guard brought me to the lobby, "I need to talk to you." "I have nothing to say to you, Tyler. Please, just 5 minutes. It's about Jessica." Against my better judgment, I agreed to hear him out. We sat in the lobby's seating area, with the security guard watching us from his desk. "Jessica and I broke up," Tyler said without preamble, 2 weeks after we got back from Europe. "She blamed me for everything, losing the money, getting you angry, ruining her family relationships." "And why are you telling me this?" Tyler looked ashamed for the first time since I'd known him. "Because she was right. It was my idea to take your money. I was the one who suggested manipulating your emotions about your daughter. Jessica just went along with it because she was infatuated with me." I stared at him, trying to process this admission. "Are you asking me to forgive her?" "I'm asking you to consider that maybe she's not as bad as those emails made her seem. She's young and stupid and she made terrible choices, but she's not evil." I thought about Margaret's son, about second chances and the possibility of redemption. Where is Jessica now? Working at a diner downtown, living in a studio apartment she can barely afford. She's struggling, Mrs. Patterson. Really struggling. "And you? Have you paid off your gambling debts?" Tyler's face darkened. "I'm working on it, but that's not your problem anymore. I just thought you should know that Jessica isn't the person she was when she was with me." After Tyler left, I found myself thinking about Jessica for the first time in weeks. I wondered if she had really changed, if losing everything had taught her the lessons I had been unable to teach her myself. Part of me was curious about how she was managing on her own, whether she had developed any appreciation for the sacrifices I had made over the years. But curiosity wasn't enough to make me reach out. Trust, once broken so completely, couldn't be rebuilt with words or promises. If Jessica wanted a relationship with me, she would have to prove she deserved one. And proving it would take more than struggling for a few months. It would take years of consistent, honest behavior. On my 71st birthday, I celebrated with my new community at Sunset Gardens. Margaret organized a potluck dinner, and the entire building participated. We ate cake in the community room while jazz music played softly in the background. People shared stories, laughed genuinely, and treated me like I mattered simply because I existed, not because of what I could give them. "Make a wish," called out Frank, the retired engineer who lived on the 3rd floor. I closed my eyes and thought about what I wanted most. Peace, security, the kind of relationships where affection wasn't a transaction. When I opened my eyes and blew out the candles, I realized I already had everything I had wished for. Later that evening, as I was cleaning up in my apartment, I found the photo album I had saved from Emma's room. I opened it slowly, looking at pictures of my daughter throughout her life. As a baby, a school child, a teenager, a young mother holding Jessica for the first time. In every photo, Emma was smiling genuinely, radiating the kind of warmth and kindness that couldn't be faked. "I hope you understand," I said to her picture. "I tried to love Jessica the way you would have wanted me to, but I couldn't let her destroy me in your memory." I closed the album and put it away. Emma was gone, and Jessica had made her choices. But I was still here, still alive, still capable of building meaningful relationships with people who valued me. At 71 years old, I was finally free to live for myself instead of for the ghosts of what my family could have been. The next morning, I woke up in my sunny apartment, made coffee, and sat on my small balcony watching the sunrise. Somewhere across town, Jessica was probably getting ready for another shift at the diner, learning what it meant to work for her money instead of manipulating others for it. Somewhere else, Tyler was facing the consequences of his gambling addiction without my financial cushion to soften the blow. And here I was, surrounded by friends who chose to spend time with me not because they needed something, but because they enjoyed my company. For the first time in years, my phone wasn't ringing with requests for money or favors. My calendar was full of activities I actually wanted to do. My bank account was modest but stable, and every dollar in it belonged to me. I had learned that family isn't defined by blood or obligation, but by love, respect, and genuine care. Sometimes the family you're born with isn't the family you deserve. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is let go of people who treat you as less than you're worth. I was finally home.